Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're jumping into the world of carbon credits and offsets. It's complex, fast-moving.
Definitely. Crucial topic, though. We've got this really comprehensive guide to walk us through it.
Right, so the plan is to break it down what they are, how they work, and, why they actually matter for climate change.
Exactly. The guide covers everything from the basics, the markets, verification, even dives into specifics like blue carbon.
Our mission, then, is to make sense of it all for you. Cut through the jargon.
Yep. Give you the key insights, the opportunities, the things you really need to know.
Okay, let's start at the beginning. Carbon Markets 101. What is a carbon market? Sounds kind of abstract.
Well, think of it as a marketplace, basically. But instead of goods, you're trading tools, instruments really, that represent reduced greenhouse gas emissions.
So putting a price on carbon.
Essentially, yes. It creates a financial incentive, a reason for businesses to lower their emissions, and it helps fund cleaner ways of doing things.
And this idea, it's been around a while, hasn't it?
It has. You can trace the roots back to the Kyoto Protocol in, 1997?
Right.
But it's really gained momentum more recently. Think regional markets popping up, more investment flowing in. And of course, the Paris Agreement in 2015 really pushed countries towards setting national targets.
What about here in the U.S.? I feel like I hear about state initiatives, but not much federally.
You're absolutely right. There's no single federal carbon market.
Yeah.
Yet anyway. But states are definitely active. California's got its cap-and-trade system. That's pretty well known.
Okay.
Then there's RGGI. That's the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative. It's 11 northeastern states working together.
11 states. Wow.
Yeah. And more recently, Washington State launched a cap-and-invest program in 2023. Oregon started one in 2022. So lots happening at the state level.
So why should, say, a business owner or just an informed citizen really try to get their head around this stuff? Credits, offsets.
Good question. Well, several reasons. First, if you're in a region with one of these mandatory programs, it directly affects you. You have to comply.
Makes sense.
Second, consumers are asking for it. More and more people want sustainable options, pushing companies to act.
Right, the pressure's on.
And third, there are policy incentives, potential investment angles. It's just becoming part of the economic landscape,
But let's dive into those terms then. Carbon credits and carbon offsets. Are they interchangeable?
Not exactly. People sometimes use them loosely, but they work differently. Think of carbon credits, sometimes called allowances, more like permission slips.
Permission slips.
Yeah, permission to emit a certain amount. Usually you buy these from the government or a regulatory body. The money flows sort of vertically back to the regulator.
Okay.
And if a company comes in under its limit, if it doesn't use all its permission slips.
So they sell the leftovers.
Exactly. They can sell those excess credits to another company that maybe went over its limit. It's kind of like a tax system for emissions, in a way.
Got it. So that's credits.
Yeah.
What about offsets?
Offsets are different. They're generated when a project or maybe a company's specific activity actually removes carbon from the atmosphere or prevents it from being emitted in the first place.
Like planting trees.
Planting trees is a classic example, yeah. Or maybe building a wind farm instead of a coal plant. These offsets are then traded, often horizontally, between companies or even individuals.
So the money flows between companies, not necessarily back to the government.
Right. You might hear them called offset credits sometimes, which adds to the confusion.
Ah.
But the key thing is, credits are usually tied to mandatory compliance, whereas offsets are generally part of the voluntary effort to reduce emissions.
And they're both measured in the same unit.
Yes, that's important. The standard unit is 1 metric ton of carbon dioxide equivalent. CO2e, you'll see it written.
The CO2e.
It lets us compare the impact of different greenhouse gases like methane back to CO2.
Any way to make that feel real? A ton of CO2e.
Mm-hmm. Okay, try this. The average American generates something like 16 tons of CO2e per year, just living life.
16 tons. Wow.
Or imagine driving a car, maybe getting 22 miles per gallon, all the way from New York to Las Vegas. That trip. That's about 1 ton of CO2e.
Okay, that definitely puts it in perspective. So how do these things actually get created? Where do credits come from?
Credits, the permission slip kind, are typically issued by governments or regulatory bodies. Think back to Kyoto, Paris. Those agreements set the stage. Or state programs like California's issuing credits for gas and electricity providers.
And it's usually part of that cap and trade system you mentioned.
Exactly. They set a limit the cap on total emissions for certain industries or the whole region.
And that cap shrinks over time.
Usually. Yeah, that's the trade part. Companies get or buy credits, those permission slips. If they emit less, they sell. If they need more, they buy.
And this cap and trade idea is catching on globally.
Oh, absolutely. By 2024, you've got systems in Canada, the EU, UK, China, New Zealand, Japan, South Korea, tons of places.
Wow.
I think the latest count was something like 46 national and 37 subnational programs, covering maybe 23% of global emissions. And new ones are still popping up. Indonesia, Vietnam, Malaysia's planning one.
So the incentive is pretty clear. Cut your emissions, stay under the cap, maybe even make some money selling credits.
That's the core idea. Yep.
Okay, so that's credits. What about offsets? How are they created?
Offsets come from projects run by various organizations that actively reduce carbon in the atmosphere. We mentioned planting trees, building renewables.
Right.
These projects generate the offsets, and then companies or individuals can voluntarily buy them to compensate for their own emissions. It's all part of the voluntary carbon market, or VCM.
So buying offsets lets a company reduce its footprint even further beyond any regulations.
Precisely, or address emissions regulations don't cover.
Okay, let's talk about the marketplace itself. You've mentioned these two main types, regulated and voluntary.
Right. The regulated or compliance market is driven purely by those cap and trade rules. Company A emits less than its cap, has extra credits. Company B emits more, needs credits.
So company A sells to company B.
You got it. It ensures the overall cap is met, but allows flexibility for individual companies.
And the voluntary market, what's the driver there if it's not rules?
It's driven by choice. Businesses wanting to be greener, meet sustainability goals, respond to customer pressure.
Corporate social responsibility, that kind of thing.
Or even individuals wanting to offset their flights or driving. You see big companies setting targets like Shell aiming to offset, 120 million tons by 2030. They'll be buying in the voluntary market.
Interesting. And these markets, they work together in a way.
They can be quite complementary, yeah. The voluntary market, for instance, opens up opportunities for, say, farmers or landowners. They can do projects, generate offsets, and sell them into this growing market.
Which points towards this being a pretty significant industry now. Are there specific companies investors are watching in this space?
Oh, for sure. As the world shifts, investors are definitely looking at companies involved in the transition. Our guide highlighted a few potential top stocks for 2025.
Like who?
Well, there's Brookfield Renewable Partners, BEP. They're huge in renewables globally. Wind, solar, hydro, big expansion plans.
Yeah.
Then you have Aker Carbon Capture, AKCCF. They're all about the tech for actually capturing carbon. They have this Just Catch technology.
Capturing it from smokestacks.
Yeah, industrial sources. They've got projects like one at a cement plant in Norway. Then there's LanzaTech, LNZA. They do something really cool, convert waste emissions into things like ethanol or sustainable aviation fuel.
Wow, turning pollution into fuel.
Kinda, yeah. And Occidental Petroleum, OXY, through their 1.5 subsidiary, they're investing heavily in carbon capture and storage, including building massive direct air capture plants.
Taking CO2 right out of the air.
That's the idea. And even traditional energy players like Equinor, EQNR are getting involved. They're doing CCS, big offshore wind projects, balancing their portfolio.
Interesting mix. What about for people who don't want to pick individual stocks? ETFs.
Absolutely. ETFs are a great way to get broader exposure and diversification. The guide lists several key ones.
Gosh, yes.
Well, there's ICLN, the iShares Global Clean Energy ETF. Covers lots of renewables, usually avoids coal. TAN is the Invesco Solar ETF, purely focused on solar companies.
Makes sense.
FAN is the First Trust Global Wind Energy ETF. Does the same for wind power. CNRG is the SPDR S&P Kensho Clean Power ETF. It uses AI to pick companies across clean energy tech, including storage.
AI-driven. Interesting.
And LIT, the Global X Lithium and Battery Tech ETF. Crucial for EVs and grid storage, right? So it focuses on lithium miners and battery makers.
So ETFs offer a simpler way in, more stable, perhaps?
Generally, yeah. Spreads the risk compared to single stocks.
Okay, zooming out again. What's the overall size of these offset markets we're talking about? The voluntary ones specifically.
The voluntary market estimates put it around, say, $2.5 billion in 2023.
Okay, billion. Not huge, maybe, compared to other markets?
Not yet, but the projections are where it gets interesting. Some see it hitting $100 billion, maybe even $250 billion by 2030.
Wow, that's massive growth potential.
Huge growth. We saw over 250 million offsets, traded voluntarily in 2023. It's driven by all those net zero pledges from companies, investor interests.
But still maybe not enough.
That's the caveat, yeah. Even with that growth, experts say it's still falling short of what's needed to really hit the Paris Agreement goals.
A long way to go.
Right. So if someone, maybe a company or a landowner, wanted to produce these offsets, what kind of projects are we talking about?
There are a few main categories. Renewable energy is a big one. Wind, solar, hydro projects often generate offsets.
Okay.
Energy efficiency is another.
Mhm.
Think upgrading buildings with LED lights, making industrial processes use less energy, even efficient appliances.
Makes sense. Reducing demand.
Exactly. Then there's capturing carbon or methane. Methane capture is interesting. Burning it off converts it to CO2, which is actually much less harmful as a greenhouse gas. Over 95% less potent short term. So burning methane can create an offset.
It can, yeah. Or capturing CO2 directly from plants and storing it long term. And finally, land use and forestry. Reforestation, protecting existing forests, managing soil better to hold more carbon.
Can you give some real-world examples?
Sure. Renewables, think big hydro in Brazil or Canada, or wind farms in Denmark or Germany. Efficiency, maybe distributing efficient cook stoves in developing nations to cut wood burning.
Okay.
Carbon capture projects attached to power plants or industrial sites. Land use, large tree planting initiatives, or farmers using no-till agriculture to keep carbon locked in the soil.
Now, this sounds great, but how do we know these offsets are real? That they actually represent a ton of CO2 removed or avoided? Verification seems key.
Absolutely critical. You hit the nail on the head. Without robust verification, the market loses trust.
So who does the verifying?
There are established independent organizations. Verra is a big one. You'll see their Verified Carbon Standard, VCS. Gold Standard is another major player known for rigorous standards, often focusing on projects with community benefits, too.
Are new standards emerging?
Yes, things are evolving. The Integrity Council for the Voluntary Carbon Market, the ICVCM, just launched its core carbon principles in 2024, trying to set a global benchmark for high-quality credits.
Okay.
And the Science-Based Targets Initiative, SBTI, which helps companies set climate goals, is also putting more emphasis on the quality of offsets used to meet those targets.
So the goal is to ensure the reductions are real, measurable.
Yeah.
What was the other word? Additional.
Additional, right, meaning the reduction wouldn't have happened anyway without the offset project funding. That's crucial.
Okay, so for a company wanting to offset its emissions, what are the practical ways they do it?
Well, they could invest directly in building a solar farm, maybe, or buy renewable energy credits from an existing one.
Right.
They could upgrade their own facilities for energy efficiency, or fund projects doing that elsewhere.
What about the carbon capture side?
They could invest in capture technology, or maybe use captured CO2 to make something like biofuel, which can be considered carbon neutral in some contexts.
And land use.
Supporting tree planting projects is common. Or, if they manage land, adopting practices like returning biomass to the soil instead of burning it, improving soil health.
Switching fuels.
Yeah, switching their fleet or processes to lower carbon biofuels like ethanol or biodiesel, provided they're sustainably funded, of course.
And the key is using those verified projects we talked about.
Absolutely. Work with reputable providers, look for projects verified by standards like Verra or Gold Standard. Be wary of cheap, uncertified offsets. They might not represent real impact.
Got it. We keep coming back to the split voluntary versus compulsory markets. Just to recap that main difference.
Sure. Cap-and-trade systems, the source of credits, are usually mandatory. If you're a big emitter in that region, you have to participate. It's regulation.
Okay, top down.
Right. Offsets, on the other hand, come from the voluntary market. Companies choose to buy them. To go beyond regulations, maybe address historical emissions or cover emissions not included in the cap.
So, looking globally now, how big are these markets relative to each other? The compliance credit market versus the voluntary offset market?
The compliance market, the mandatory one, is massive. Estimates for 2024 put the total value traded around $1.5 trillion.
Trillion? Wow.
Yeah, huge volume. Something like 15.7 gigatons of CO2e traded. The EU's ETS is the biggest chunk of that, then China's national system.
It is fragmented.
Very fragmented. You've got the EU system, California, RGGI, China, all operating somewhat independently.
And the voluntary market.
Much smaller in total value right now. Remember that $2.5 billion figure for 2023, but it's growing fast and it's more accessible. Individuals can participate. Companies anywhere can participate. It's more open.
Let's talk about the corporate angle again. Corporate social responsibility, CSR. How do offsets fit in?
They fit very neatly, actually. Consumers, investors, employees, they're all increasingly aware of climate change and critical of companies that seem inactive.
So buying offsets is a way to show you're doing something.
Exactly. It signals a commitment beyond just, lip service. Investing in real, verified projects sends a tangible message. For many companies, the reputational boost from good CSR can outweigh the cost of the offsets.
So using offsets strategically gives companies more control, more impact than just complying with rules.
Potentially, yes. Compliance markets set a floor, but offsets let companies choose where and how they want to make an impact. They can pick projects that align with their brand or offer extra benefits like protecting biodiversity or helping local communities.
And they can address past emissions.
Right. Compliance schemes are forward-looking. Offsets offer a way to tackle a company's historical carbon footprint, which is something we're seeing more companies aim for. Plus, good projects offer good PR.
You mentioned Tesla earlier as generating revenue. Can selling offsets or credits actually be a business model?
It absolutely can be, and Tesla's the poster child for it. Because they only make electric vehicles, they generate way more regulatory credits than they need under schemes that average fleet emissions.
So they have a surplus.
A big surplus. And legacy automakers, still selling lots of gas cars, often need to buy credits to meet the standards.
So Tesla sells to them.
Exactly.
Yeah.
In 2023, Tesla reportedly made $1.78 billion just from selling those credits.
$1.78 billion.
Yeah. It shows how central these markets can become to corporate strategy, especially for companies built around green tech.
Okay, but this brings us back to a really critical point. Do these offsets actually reduce emissions? Is it real?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? And the honest answer is, it depends. It really hinges on the quality of the offset.
How so?
Well, for some project types, like direct carbon capture and storage, the link is pretty clear. You capture a ton of CO2, you store it, it's measurable.
Okay, more straightforward.
But for others, say, avoiding deforestation or even some renewable energy projects, proving additionality that the project wouldn't have happened anyway can be trickier. That's why the reputation of the verifier, the standards they use, Verra, Gold Standard, etc., the transparency, it's all crucial. Good projects use careful selection, meticulous monitoring, and third-party audits, often referencing standards like those from the UN's Clean Development Mechanism.
So a high-quality offset genuinely represents a ton of CO2e removed or avoided.
That's the goal. They should represent real, tangible impact. It gives companies a way to address their footprint now while they work on the bigger, harder changes to their actual operations. Kind of buys them time responsibly.
Can regular people, individuals, buy these offsets too?
Yes, increasingly so.
Yeah.
You probably can't buy directly from a huge forestry project yourself.
Right.
But there's a growing number of third-party companies and intermediaries that basically buy offsets in bulk and then sell smaller amounts to individuals.
Why go through an intermediary?
Well, they often do the vetting for you. They check the verification, ensure the offsets are legitimate. You sometimes see the option now when you book a flight or buy something online, offset the carbon footprint of this purchase. Ah, yeah, I have seen that.
Exactly. There are also websites with carbon footprint calculators. You
Right.
figure out your emissions from driving, flying, energy use, whatever.
And then buy offsets to match.
Yep. It's a way for individuals to take some personal responsibility, minimize their impact. And the growing demand here also signals opportunity for companies generating these offsets.
So bringing it together for someone listening, do I need credits or offsets? How do you decide?
Good practical question. Okay. If you're a corporation, depends. Are you covered by cap and trade? Then you might need credits for compliance.
Okay.
But you might also choose to buy offsets voluntarily to meet net zero goals, address non-capped emissions, or for CSR reasons. So potentially both.
And for an individual?
For most individuals, credits aren't really relevant or accessible. Offsets are your main tool if you want to compensate for your personal footprint.
It's like credits stop pollution at the source within the rules, and offsets clean up pollution that still happens. Is that a fair analogy? That's actually a pretty good way to think about it. Yeah, both are needed. Look at Microsoft. They aim to be carbon negative by 2030 and remove all their historical emissions by 2050. They'll need a mix of strategies, including high-quality carbon removal offsets.
So focusing on credits for a moment,
Mm-hmm.
why would a company or even an investor buy credits specifically?
For companies, again, number one is often compliance with regulations, got to meet the cap.
Right.
But holding credits can also be a strategic move, maybe anticipating future price increases. And retiring credits voluntarily shows strong environmental commitment.
What about individuals buying credits?
Less common, but some programs or vendors might allow individuals to buy and retire compliance credits, directly supporting those regulated reduction schemes. And for investors, the global carbon market is growing fast, saw about 20% growth last year, I think. So there's potential for investment returns if that trend continues. Our guide mentions a carbon investor center for folks interested in that angle.
Okay, let's shift gears to something specific and pretty cool that the guide mentioned. Blue carbon. What is that?
Blue carbon is fascinating. It refers to carbon captured and stored by coastal and marine ecosystems. Specifically, we're talking about tidal marshes, mangrove forests, and seagrass beds.
Marine forests, basically.
Kind of, yeah. Think of those dense mangrove forests you see in tropical coastal areas, like Magdalena Bay in Mexico. They're amazing ecosystems, adapted to salty, waterlogged conditions.
And they're important for carbon.
Incredibly important. Mangroves, for instance, cover a tiny fraction of the Earth's surface, like 0.1%, but they punch way above their weight in carbon storage.
How many more?
They can store up to 4 times more carbon per acre, per pound, whatever unit you use, than most terrestrial forests, like rainforests.
4 times. Wow.
Yeah. So blue carbon ecosystems are super efficient carbon sinks. And because of that high removal capacity, plus other benefits, offsets from blue carbon projects often trade at a premium price.
What are those other benefits, the second-order effects you mentioned?
Right. It's not just carbon. These ecosystems are vital. They act as natural water filters, trapping pollutants. They buffer coastlines from storms and waves, reducing erosion and flood damage. Huge value there.
Protecting communities.
Exactly. They trap sediment, which helps them build elevation and potentially keep pace with sea level rise. They're nurseries for fish and other marine life, supporting biodiversity and fisheries.
And the carbon stays locked up.
Generally for longer periods than in many land forests because it's stored in waterlogged soils where decomposition is slow. All these extra benefits contribute to that premium value for blue carbon offsets.
How does this connect back to us, maybe to our food choices? You mentioned a food footprint link.
Yeah, this is a stark connection. A lot of coastal ecosystems, especially mangroves, have been cleared for things like shrimp farming or cattle grazing.
Oh, right.
So that steak and shrimp dinner you might enjoy. If the shrimp came from ponds built where mangroves used to be, there's a hidden, potentially massive carbon footprint attached. Destroying these ecosystems releases huge amounts of stored carbon.
How much are we talking?
Globally, estimates suggest degrading coastal ecosystems releases maybe 1 billion tons of CO2 every year.
1 billion tons just from damaging those areas.
Yeah, shrimp farming alone has impacted millions, maybe 14 million hectares of mangrove aquaforests globally.
So could we see, like, eco-labels on shrimp telling you the impact?
It's possible. There's definitely discussion about transparency and maybe even requiring offsets to cover the environmental damage costs. Think about this. Those 14 million acres of wetlands. Their carbon absorption capacity is roughly the same as all the rainforests in California and New York combined.
That comparison is stunning.
Right. It's why people call blue carbon the high-grade stuff, like finding a really rich vein of gold.
And is it just mangroves and marshes? What about the wider ocean, oceanic blue carbon?
Yeah, that's the broader concept. It includes carbon captured by life in the open ocean phytoplankton, algae, larger marine life, and ocean processes.
More complex to measure, I imagine.
Definitely. It depends on location, depth, species, nutrient levels, lots of factors. But the principle is the same. Healthy marine ecosystems sequester carbon, and protecting or restoring them brings other benefits too, supporting coastal communities, biodiversity.
Wow. Okay, this has been incredibly informative, a real deep dive. If we had to boil it down, what are the main things you want people to take away from this?
Let's see. Key takeaways. First, carbon markets, both compliance credits and voluntary offsets, are really important tools now for tackling climate change. You need to understand them.
Okay.
Second, credits and offsets work differently, but both aim to cut emissions. Credits are often about rules, offsets about voluntary action and going further.
Got it.
Third, there's huge growth projected, especially in the voluntary market. That means opportunities, but also challenges in ensuring quality.
Right, the verification piece.
Crucial. And finally, specific areas like blue carbon show just how powerful certain ecosystems are, and the value of protecting them goes way beyond just the carbon.
Really well summarized. Okay, leaves us with a final thought for you, the listener. As these carbon markets evolve so quickly, and we understand more about ecosystems like mangroves, what new ideas or innovations might pop up next to speed up climate action? And critically, what role do our own choices as individuals and in businesses play in making those future solutions work? Good question to ponder. Indeed. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive today.